Hey, how are you? I'm okay, fine, thank you. Have you ever wondered how Japan went from this to this? Well, it's because of this. But seriously, after World War II, Japan faced a terrible burden. The country was no longer being judged only by its defeat, but by the memory of militarism and destruction. In the years after the war, Japan was under Allied occupation and forced to demilitarize. The old propaganda machine was broken apart, militarist messaging disappeared, and public communication was redirected toward peace and democracy. This period was mainly psychological. Japan needed the world to stop seeing only the war and start seeing the possibility of renewal. During these years, Japan began slowly returning to the international community. It joined UNESCO and signed the San Francisco Peace Treaty in 1951 and entered the United Nations in 1956. These steps mattered because they were symbolic. Japan is returning, but as a different country. At the same time, cultural exchange began to play quite but important role. Japan started building educational ties with other countries. Scholarship programs opened doors for foreign students, and exchange programs helped create the first generation of people who would know Japan not as an enemy but as a partner. As Japan's economy recovered, its image began to change with it. The country was no longer seen only through the lens of war. Instead, the world began to notice Japanese industry, Japanese discipline, but the government did not leave this image to chance. It actively promoted Japan as a peaceful and cultured nation. Major events like the 1964 Tokyo Olympics and the 1970 Osaka Expo were more than celebrations. They were carefully managed global statements. They showed a country that had rebuilt itself and was ready to stand among the world's leading nations. Japan also began using education and language as tools of diplomacy. Foreign student scholarships expanded, and the government placed increasing value on mutual understanding. Japan wanted to be known, and the creation of the Japan Foundation in 1972 really marked a turning point for Japan. And I really wanted to make it clear, this was no longer just about scattered exchange programs or symbolic gestures. Japan now had a formal institution dedicated to cultural diplomacy. The Japan Foundation was established to support language teaching, scholarships, exhibitions, art exchange, and academic ties. In other words, Japan was now building its image, massive investment, and a long-term strategy. And I want you to understand that this mattered because soft power does not grow by accident. It grows through patience and investment. In the 1970s, the foundation's budget increased a lot, showing how seriously the government took the idea of cultural diplomacy. Japan was no longer only exporting products. Now, it was exporting familiarity, goodwill, and trust. Tourism also became part of this strategy. Japan began to understand that a better image could attract more visitors, and more visitors could deepen familiarity with the country. Culture, in this sense, was not just beauty, it was also influence. By the late 80s, Japan's diplomacy became more ambitious. One of the most important developments was the GET program, launched in 1987. Through the program, Japan brought young foreigners into schools and communities across the country as teachers and cultural assistants. This was a powerful idea. Instead of speaking about Japan from afar, these participants lived inside Japanese society. They saw it up close, and many later became informal ambassadors for Japan in their own countries. Japan also expanded its educational outreach. The 100,000 foreign students plan reflected a larger goal to make Japan a place of learning. The government wanted foreign students to leave with more than a degree. It wanted them to live with understanding and connection. At the same time, Japan faced a difficult challenge. In the late 80s, it was criticized abroad in waves of so-called Japan bashing. Instead of withdrawing, the government responded by increasing cultural and public diplomacy efforts. It invested more in exchange programs, research networks, and cooperation with foreign institutions. This was a clear sign that Japan understood something important. A national image is fragile. It can be damaged quickly, but rebuilding it takes years of patient work. Media also became a new frontier. Japan began pushing its voice outward through broadcasting and program exports. NHK World expanded Japan's overseas media presence, while organizations like JAMCO helped export Japanese television programs. Japan was no longer only speaking through diplomats and scholars. It was mainly speaking through images, stories, music, and most importantly, entertainment. By the 90s, Japan's international image had become much more complex and much more powerful. The government was now openly treated culture as a part of diplomacy. Cultural exchange plans, summit discussions, and interministerial coordination all showed that Japan's leaders saw image building as a serious national task. This was also the period when Japan's culture appeal became more visible to the world. Japanese animation, television, design, and consumer culture began to travel further abroad. What had once been seen as domestic popular culture was now becoming part of Japan's international identity. By 2000, the result was clear. Japan was no longer viewed mainly as the country of wartime aggression. It was increasingly seen as a nation of technology, order, culture, and creativity. Tourism had grown, foreign exchange networks had expanded, and Japan's voice in the world had become stronger. This transformation did not happen overnight. It was built through decades of policy, investment, institutions, and resistance. Between 1945 and 2000, Japan carried out one of the most careful image transformations in the modern history. It moved from defeat to diplomacy, from militarism to peace, from isolation to cultural influence. Through education, exchange, media, tourism, and institutions like the Japan Foundation and GET, Japan rebuilt the way the world saw it.